that we want to share.
There you go.
Okay.
Colleagues, welcome back to our room. We had visited the other room, but we are back here for our last presentation before the happy hour. The next presenter is again Prof Willie. He will be talking about framing career well-being amongst expatriates, knowledge workers, and narrative analysis. Welcome back, Prof Willie.
Okay, thank you, Prof. So at least now I can talk about some work that we have done again. But I think there's an angle which I'm trying to work on now, which has been giving me headaches, which is now, once you have come up with a framework, how do you create instruments? And I think the battle of instruments is important, because what happens is that most of the instruments are not designed in our context. So what I mean by that is that most of our students who do quantitative research, they take scales which are designed in other countries, and then they bring them, and then we have to modify them to suit our context. So what this paper seeks to argue now is to show you part of the experience, the exciting part, which was the first part, collecting the qualitative data, but now the difficult part when we've created a framework in trying to create, oh, there we go. Oh, sorry. So we just do this. Okay. So, okay, I hope I do this correctly. Okay. So this comes out of obviously something that we've done with some colleagues at UNISA, Ingrid Potgieter, Nadia Ferreira, and Melinda Kutsia, which was a book chapter which came out with Springer. And now the second part of the process now, which I'm trying to work on, is to create a scale based on the work that we've done. So the book is available, and copies are available, yeah. So in the South African context, we are facing a number of challenges of a skills nature, skills shortage. The unemployment statistics have just been released. I think we're on 34.67 or 8, and rising. In fact, one analyst has predicted that we might go to the 40% mark by end of next year. Now, that sounds very extreme, but I think there's necessity. We've got a battle for skills. We need skills in the country. Knowledge workers are viewed as important conduits for these types of skills. These people do jobs which are deemed to be linked with the capability of knowledge as a factor of production. And most of them, using Peter Drucker, traditional management theorists, are really about finding ways in which countries, economies can attain a competitive advantage through the use of technology. And we're starting to talk about ICT, information communication technology, but we're also starting to talk about the fourth industrial revolution. In countries like Uganda, people like Waswa Balunya actually argue that it is presumptuous for Uganda to be arguing that they are in the fourth industrial revolution when they've not yet experienced the first or the second revolution. So it's not always set in stone that we are all together. I've got a privilege of working with Prof Nana on a project funded by the CSIR, which is looking at some of these aspects related to knowledge and knowledge creation, particularly within HDIs. And some of the stuff that we've observed there is that there's a lot of investment in technology. I mean, I'm impressed by the facility in front of us right now. how it allows us to be able to interact with people in a different room, respecting COVID regulations. You know, we are advancing, but what we also need to be paying attention are the users of the technology. Traditionally in the literature, we would call them end users, you know, the people who are sitting behind the computers. And my focus in this current work is guided by some theoretical postulations. The first is a call for just not understanding the experiences and struggles by expatriates, but also their adjustment to the new context. Professor Jonathan Jansen talks about experiences that he's had as a visiting scholar in different countries and how that experience has also helped him broaden his worldview about what it means to be an international scholar, but the challenges that it comes with. Further, there's this notion of a career identity. How does the identity develop within such a context? I mean, this is fascinating because you have children of migrants from African countries, different African countries, settling in South Africa, who are now speaking fluent isiZulu more than their own language, and who have embraced the local conditions because of the setup that they are in. Those are aspects within the IOP literature which is argued to be critical. So linked to this is a stream of work which is emerging and also developing, which is around work psychology, but also the value and the role that technology plays in all of this. Actuated by calls within the knowledge management literature for an emphasis in understanding not just the work aspect, but the relation aspect in how knowledge is applied. So the research positions individuals described as knowledge workers as important actors due to their expertise, especially in a specialized discipline, and how then do they adjust to the context around them. The overall research question which guided me was, what are the factors and experiences that influence the career well-being of a sample of expatriates in South Africa, particularly those in the knowledge-based economy or knowledge-based professions, particularly in ICT in various organizations. I utilized two theories here. The first is the job demands resources theory, popular, the JDR, Barker and Demiruti, and also Mark Savicas's career construction theory. And I like the career construction theory because it allows for a more subjective yet process type of understanding of aspects related to the career. The empirical literature can be grouped into three: the role of environmental factors, the role of organizational factors, and the role of technology in itself. But I think what I've done there is put them in a more linear fashion, but they are actually messier and they are more interacting. I mean, using the systems theory framework, they are actually showing signs of encroachment between one and the other. So I utilized the qualitative study, interviews. That was just before the pandemic. So probably the last time we had interviews of a nature where we could sit down and sit with people. And also the 3 levels of meaning making, which are popular with people who work with narrative analysis. I put some of the tables there, I put some of the tables there, not clear, but I'll just go through the findings. The first one, we asked these knowledge workers, what is it that is, would you consider as meeting the obligation of a person who is experiencing career well-being at the fullest? So we had satisfiers, and the chief of which was the financial aspect, and part of the financial aspect had to do with remittances that they were sending back home. So they were working in a very heavily busy ICT sector. Some quotes there: I have moved 3 jobs in the last year, not because this person is a serial job hopper, but because they're just in demand. Their skills are being needed, and they're really selling themselves to the best bidder in terms of the financial benefit to it. There's always work in my sector. More work means more money and a guaranteed source of income. This, for me, allows me to be able to do things I like and help my family. And then finally, recently, our company is beginning to offer a range of financial options, stock options for that matter, one participant said, where they are trying to keep them in the same company by offering stock options that they can purchase. So that was the first finding around satisfiers related to finance. There were also satisfiers related to career growth. When I attend interviews, next to the financial package, I prioritize growth. So it was not just about the money. I just don't want to be stagnant in a sector that is constantly changing. Another participant, so within the ICT sector, companies are beginning to realize the need for a balance, and the balance is really between the financial package and also the other non-financial package, which is predominantly supported in the literature. We usually host expats who come to train us. The best part is when we visit places like India and Texas on further development ventures. The experience is always uplifting in knowing that our industry is continuously relevant. So, the biggest inhibitor. What are the biggest challenges that expatriate workers in the ICT sector face? One of them was work-home challenge. A friend of mine described this as well. This is an interesting challenge that anybody who's trying to soar up in their profession will experience. But what was significant here is that some of these guys were directors and big shot people, but they were still facing work-home challenges. Conflict was inevitable. I sometimes feel that being in this job makes it something, creates this conflict. Little or no support exists in managing work-home life balance. They wanted the work-home life balance, but it was not happening. Since I became a manager, I felt a pressure to perform and make sure that I perform on the best. Given my being a foreigner, the pressure doubles up and ultimately affects relations at home. Now, relations at home could be spouses, partners, and so forth. Long hours of work just make it difficult, especially when we're chasing a deadline. Meanwhile, you have other aspects to focus on, like your relationships. So the participants wanted to prioritize the relationships, but the job got in the way, if you like. Now, what was also interesting is then I asked the participants the type of, what they call the career work that, somebody muted me. The type of career work that, yeah, it's fine. The type of career work that people do. We found it on a continuum. Negotiation, renegotiation, and no compromise. So let's start with what are the things that they are not willing to compromise. In the past 3 years, I have moved 3 jobs. If I perceive no growth, I move. You get those employers who try to make promises to try and keep you. I've learned to read this from a distance, and I'm not prepared to move. So, I'm prepared to move if obviously they are not happy. Some things are just not for sale, like my career advancement. So what were they prepared to negotiate? I've arranged with my employer for me to come in early so that I can knock off early to help my kids and wife. Now, this was interesting because this was before the pandemic, before working at home. But we could see signs of it. Maybe it was prophetic leading to it that sooner or later the system of constantly getting people in the office took a radical change after with the entrance of the pandemic. So there's an expectation to work after hours, but I even arranged this. I avoided this, so come in half a day on a Saturday. And then as a group of employees, we persuaded our boss to invest in technology that allows telework and teleconferencing. Yesterday, with our colleagues in the business management department, they informed us of software that they have that allows them, once a student logs in, they cannot do any other activity except to complete the task. This is something which I think we, as an institution, would like to invest in because it's important. So this was then the focus. But where was the renegotiation part, the middle part? Competition in our sectors, so salaries were constantly renegotiated. I can come with an offer letter, I don't want to leave, but as a negotiation tool, the employers will start to renegotiate. You must keep on negotiating with the boss, get an offer that you want. So salaries were the ones that were mostly renegotiated. But colleagues, this is where it gets interesting for me because it was nice that we published this, but then the next thing that I started to do was then what type of framework can I create? A framework that I hope one day My surname could be there, the Chinyamurindi Framework on Career Wellbeing of Knowledge Workers. And this is where the headache is currently at the moment. So what I then did, I took all the findings and I put them in the framework. And the framework looks like this. It looks nice and simple, but it's more complex and messy. What is the next agenda that I'm currently busy with? It's instrumentation. So what I'm trying to do now is to create a scale for each and every one of those items that I found in my research. A scale for satisfiers, a scale for inhibitors, and I'm constantly going to the data. So the challenge which has happened is that I have found from the interviews close to about 15 to 20 questions as satisfiers, 15 to 20 questions as inhibitors, 15 to 20 questions as things negotiation, renegotiation, and no compromise. And so created those questions, put them on a Likert scale, went and then asked a sample of not necessarily knowledge workers, but people who work within the knowledge industry. And some of the items loaded nicely and others did not. So it's a constant struggle of trying to make it work. But what do we get out of all of this? I think for me, the most important thing, the study magnifies the importance of also supporting using qualitative research to support our quants, our numbers. I will not stand and bash numbers, but I think numbers also need to be supported by qualitative voices and experiences. And often this is a missing link, because when I examine and I get a dissertation, I am impressed by the models. I'm impressed by the latent variables and all of these partial least squares method, and this is nice because it makes the thesis bulkier, but also there's also necessity to support all of this. And what we are now currently doing is to constantly develop these scales and understand maybe the problem is also with the way the questions have been asked, and also seeking to instrument. And hopefully maybe next year, Prof, at this conference which was marketed, I will bring the scale as a full paper that we could work on and show the colleagues developing the scales of this framework. Thank you. Yes, I'm standing between lunch and...
But I told you that I'm not gonna time